Hello, I'm David Belzy, and in this webinar I want to share some ideas with you about fundraising basics for church capital projects. But first of all, note that the Bible talks about money more than any other subject. I think this is because we as the people of God have great difficulty handling money, and the Lord has seen fit to try to help us with this important subject. Interestingly, the Bible also addresses the issue of fundraising, and specifically for church building projects. Our first example of this is found in Exodus 35 and 36, where we read the account of Moses building the tabernacle. You can read the entire story for yourself, but let's notice a couple of key points. First, after Moses receives instructions for the actual design of the tabernacle from God, he shares the need for it with his people. Then he asks them for support in finding the materials and the resources for the tabernacle. Now, this is the first time in the Bible that a leader of the people of God actually does an ask for funding. So our first principle in Christian fundraising is that asking for money is a necessary part of the process. Then notice in 35:21 that everyone whose heart is stirred gives. The stirring of the heart seems to indicate that Moses shared the vision for the tabernacle with them in such a way that he tapped into their emotions. So vision casting is a second principle for fundraising. The remainder of the passage describes how Moses hires what we would call a project manager today to give direction to the construction process, recruiting people as needed. The offering is received, more than enough comes in, and the third principle is that people do, in fact, respond generously when the vision is shared and they are asked appropriately. The second biblical example is found in 1 Chronicles 29, where King David is raising the funds to build the first temple in Jerusalem. Verse 1 tells us that a permanent house of God is needed for his people. So our fourth principle is that of sharing the need for the temple. To do this, King David has invited all of his leaders from all over Israel to Jerusalem for a temple summit. Then in verse 2, we glean two key principles in church fundraising. First, or fifth overall, is that leaders must lead. King David tells them how much he is committing to the project. Now, while we do not suggest that any one person should reveal how much he or she is giving to a campaign today, we do encourage churches to lump all the commitments of leaders together and make that amount known to the rest of the congregation at a key point in the campaign. The second principle, or sixth overall, is that giving to a capital project should be over and above what is normally given to God's work. We don't encourage people to rob Peter to pay Paul or to transfer giving from one area to the other. The ministry of the church obviously needs to be sustained. David asks his commitment from his people in the language of consecration. He says to his gathered leaders, "Now, who among you will consecrate himself to God today?" So a seventh principle of fundraising is the need to encourage people to renew their commitment to God. Notice in the account that his leaders respond by pledging their support. And then in verse 9, all the people rejoice at what the leaders have done, and they follow through by giving as well. So that gives us a brief look at what the Bible has to say about fundraising for church capital projects. With these principles in mind, we come up with this definition of a capital campaign in our 21st century context. A capital campaign is the mounting of a significant fundraising effort to provide for major capital needs such as new buildings, expansions, or renovations. Such an effort involves long-range planning, persuasive campaign literature, effective application of proven procedures, careful scheduling and publicity, all within a specified time period and a prescribed budget. Capital campaigns are different from the annual stewardship drive run by some churches or the tithing sermon preached by others. In fact, capital campaigns are more appealing to most supporters than is the ask for support of the general fund of the church. However, in order for a capital campaign to be successful, you must first have a strong donor base that provides a balanced budget for the year-round ministry of the church. Capital campaigns grow out of the general donor base, of course, and in the end positively affect the operational giving to the church. So a well-run capital campaign focused on a new vision for the future will often generate interest in what the church is doing and investment in the overall ministry of the church. So, what are some requirements for a successful capital campaign? Well, first, a good database of annual giving that will generate lists and labels of various giving groups. While actual giving data is kept confidential, it's important for the team to be able to identify, for example, who might fit into a pace-setting group of leaders, similar to King David's leaders. Then second, you need a strong case for support. We suggest a 10 to 16 page brochure outlining where you've come from as a church, where you're going, how you're going to get there, how much it will cost, and how your people can be involved. Third, you need a realistic goal. We devote an entire webinar to this important subject because a goal that is too large and unreachable is demoralizing. And a goal that is too small and reached early in the campaign causes some people to opt out. Fourth, you need a sufficient pool of qualified donors. In most Canadian churches, there are about 50% who give less than $1,000 a year, many that give nothing. While some of these may increase their giving during a capital campaign, you'll be relying mainly on those that give regularly right now. Then fifth, like King David, you need your leadership on board early in the process. You cannot expect your people to give if the leaders are not prepared to support the project. Sixth, while a good consultant comes in with a model and ideas of how a campaign should be run, he cannot actually raise the money for you. He must have a volunteer team who will drive the campaign locally. We discussed this in another webinar, but for now, plan on recruiting about 10 key persons to work on a campaign leadership team or steering committee to run the campaign. Seventh, you need clear campaign organization and policies. A coach, of course, provides the organizational structure. The church provides the policies. For example, will you accept gifts from non-members or from foundations? Like here in Alberta, the Wild Rose Foundation, that is funded by lotteries. Will you accept gifts from non-believers or businesses from the community? Then eighth, most churches do have adequate software, but it's wise to take the time prior to the campaign to find out if everyone's address is current and even if they're currently attending your church. Ninth, some churches require approval from their head office or district to run a fundraiser. Check your constitution and bylaws for this. So that brings us to the end of our introductory webinar on capital project fundraising for churches. For more information, please feel free to contact us either at our Eastern or Western office as indicated here. We're happy to come to your church to present this and other webinars to your church leadership and to answer questions specific to your church. Having worked with churches of all sizes and many denominations, we usually are able to provide you with information that will assist you with your capital project. Thank you for watching.